Welcome back to episode 3 of the Lower Calorie series. Today we are covering the lovely chicken parmesan. First, we'll make the classic deep-fried restaurant version to establish a baseline of calories, and more importantly, understand the underlying techniques of how it's made. Then we'll analyze where we can make lower calorie substitutions while maintaining the same volume of food and the highest level of taste adherence to the original version. In addition, this lower cal version is significantly lower in carbs as well, as it has 23 less grams of carbohydrates, so let's learn how to make it. Hey everyone, I'm Ethan, a home cooking nerd who likes to find better ways to cook and share them with all of you. This morning I woke up to 100,000 subscribers, which is pretty nuts considering that 2 weeks ago we were just around 20K. And so I just gotta say a huge shout out to everyone who has liked, commented, subscribed, and decided to follow along in this journey. I've never been more motivated to provide you the best in practical and functional home cooking content. But anyway, today's video is all about chicken parm. Let's hop into the restaurant style version first. So here's what a classically deep-fried chicken parm may look like. First, the chicken is sliced in half without going all the way through so it opens like a book, which will promote even cooking. This is generously seasoned with salt and then set aside while we set up a classic breading station. To one plate, plain flour is added, to the second plate, beaten egg, and to the final plate, panko breadcrumbs along with dried oregano, some grated Parmigiano Reggiano, and a pinch of garlic powder. Using the wet hand, dry hand technique, the chicken is first dipped in the flour, followed by the egg, and lastly the seasoned breadcrumbs. Meanwhile, oil has been heated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit in a large wok, then the cutlet is carefully lowered away from you and fried on one side until golden brown. It is then flipped over and fried on the other side, and then once it is golden crispy all over, it is laid on paper towels to catch excess oil. Now, we need some sauce. For a basic red sauce, olive oil is added to a pan, then diced onions, carrots and celery, and a little pinch of salt. This is cooked until the onions are translucent, then I blended up some whole tomatoes and poured those in. Simmer over low for about 20 minutes, stirring it occasionally, and then raise the heat up a bit to a stronger simmer until it is well reduced and thick tomato sauce. Turn off the heat and adjust the salt to taste, and sugar if it's a little bit too acidic. To assemble the chicken parm, place the fried cutlet on a baking sheet, top with a couple heaping spoonfuls of that tomato sauce, some Parmigiano Reggiano, and some low moisture mozzarella for melting. Place the whole thing under the broiler for around 5 to 7 minutes until bubbly goodness arrives. Cheesy, saucy, crispy chicken, it's oh so delicious. Let's take a look at the calorie breakdown. For this chicken parm, I'm calling it 2 servings since it is almost 9 ounces of chicken. So for 1 serving or half of the cutlet, the restaurant style version comes in at 567 calories, 22 grams of carbs, 34 grams of fat, and 42 grams of protein. Now, I will say this one was kind of a pain to calculate accurate calories because there's a little leftover flour, egg, and breadcrumbs from the coating. Then for the oil, I had to weigh how much I added in the beginning, then weigh how much I had left, then weigh the starting weight of the paper towels, and then weigh them how much they weighed after absorbing oil, and add that back to what oil I had left. So I did my best to get an accurate reading for these. Anyway, let's talk about the substitutions. First up, I will not be deep frying the low-cal version and instead baking them with some cooking spray as the source of oil. This saves about 140 calories per serving by my estimates, but the question is, what do we lose by not deep frying? This one is all about texture. From the food lab, we learned that as soon as food is dropped into hot oil, the water inside the food rapidly evaporates, which is released via steam bubbles. As the water moves out, oil is absorbed, then the protein is rapidly coagulated in our egg protein breading, setting that crust in place. Next, the Maillard or browning reaction takes place, giving us that beautiful golden brown crust we know and love in about 6 to 8 minutes. With the baking of the chicken, all this stuff will happen, but much, much slower. You see, hot oil contains more energy than hot air because it has more molecules. You can stick your hand in a 500-degree oven and not get instantly burned, but try that in 350-degree oil and you'll end up with a gruesome injury. Oil also creates convection patterns around the food, constantly transferring the energy faster. This is the same idea behind convection ovens or air fryers, which move air around the food, crisping it up faster, but it's still nowhere near as efficient as deep frying. With the chicken baked in the oven, the water takes longer to evaporate, so the crust doesn't set as well on the chicken, and it takes longer for the Maillard reaction to start happening for that golden brown and crispy crust. Here's a little comparison of the crust that I was able to get from both the deep frying and the baked version. When that crust finally gets a little bit crispy, which took around 25 minutes in the oven for me, that chicken is going to be well overcooked as well. So while the chicken texture may not be ideal, I can confirm it is still mighty delicious, and you do save quite a bit of calories. On to the next one. I decided to use pork panko, aka ground up pork rinds, instead of traditional breadcrumbs. It comes in at just 20 less calories per serving, but there are no carbs and it has a lot more protein, which is a plus for me. They brown up a little bit differently than regular panko, but part of that is due to the cooking method itself, and the taste is more preference than anything. Lastly, I made a lower calorie red sauce using butter instead of olive oil. You heard me right. Per tablespoon of butter has 20 less calories than olive oil, and since I use 42 grams of butter instead of 56 grams of olive oil, one serving comes in at 45 less calories. And this is something that I picked up from Marcella Hazan's book, and I actually prefer the creaminess the butter gives the sauce instead of olive oil. Anyway, I think it's time for our step-by-step recipe, and then we'll do this side-by-side calorie breakdown. First, let's prep our basic red sauce. Chop the onion in a quarter and just remove the outer skin, then add a whole can of peeled tomatoes to a food processor and blitz them up until they are smooth. At the stove, add the tomatoes, onions, and 42 grams of butter to a saucepan over medium-low heat. You're going to let this simmer for around 45 minutes, stirring it occasionally. Once the sauce has reduced and is nice and thick, turn off the heat, and now for the most important part, taste it. Add salt and sugar to taste. Salt is the more important of the two, so add that first bit by bit until you enjoy it. If the sauce is too acidic from the tomatoes, just add a little bit of sugar, and if you are using basil, add it right at the end of cooking with the sauce off the heat to preserve the breakdown of the basil flavor, and now we can go back to our chicken. Using a sharp knife, slice halfway into the chicken without slicing all the way through. Leave a hinge on the chicken so it folds open like a book and lies flat to promote even cooking. If needed, you can flatten the chicken by smashing it with a pot, but I find it's not necessary. Generously sprinkle with coarse kosher salt and set this aside. Prepare the breading station with 3 plates or large bowls. To the first plate, add 15 grams of flour. To the second plate, add the beaten egg. And to the third plate, add a serving of the pork rind panko, some dried oregano, Parmesan Reggiano, and a pinch of garlic powder or whatever seasonings that you like. Using the wet hand, dry hand technique, pick up the chicken with your right hand and drop it into the flour. Toss the flour on the chicken to evenly coat the exterior so it's completely dry all about. Then pick up the chicken from the flour and drop it into the egg, and again turning the chicken over to completely coat it with the eggs. Lastly, drop the chicken into the seasoned panko and toss the breadcrumbs on the chicken so ensure you get even coverage all around the exterior of the chicken, and if you need to add or sprinkle a little bit more in certain places, do so, and don't be afraid to really press those breadcrumbs all over the chicken so we get a nice breading. Move the breaded chicken to a wire rack over a baking sheet and just spray the exterior of the chicken with 3 1-second sprays. Add the chicken to a 500-degree Fahrenheit oven or 475 on convection, or if you have an air fryer. You're going to bake this for about 10 minutes and then turn the oven on the broiler setting and bake it for about 8 minutes each, keeping an eye on it while it browns. Flip it once more and bake under the broiler for another 8 to 10 minutes until it starts to get browned and crispy to your liking. And I do want to note the timing will depend on the oven setting and the size of the chicken breast, so just use your best judgment. You can let it go longer for a crispier crust, but the chicken will become quite overcooked. However, do what you prefer. To assemble the chicken parm, place the cutlet on a baking sheet or oven-safe plate, then spread on the sauce and top with Parmesan Reggiano and low-moisture mozzarella for melting. You're going to place this under the broiler until the cheese is melted and starting to brown, around 5 to 7 minutes, and then top this with minced parsley if you would like, and you can serve it and enjoy. So while it's not deep fried, it's still cheesy, saucy, and oven fried chicken that is mighty delicious. For the calorie breakdown, again, I'm going to be calling this 2 servings, but if you are a hungry boy like me, sometimes it's just 1. Anyway, for 1 serving or half of the cutlet, it comes in at 387 calories, 10 grams of carbs, 18 grams of fat, and 44 grams of protein, which is definitely pretty solid. This is a dish I'll definitely be making the next time I cut. And lastly, here's the side-by-side calorie breakdown with the restaurant-style version. And again, these calories are for the same volume of food. Oh, so finally, it is taste test time. Let's give a couple bites of each and then break them down and compare these differences. So I've got the restaurant style one here on the right, and I have the lower cal, low carb version here on the left. Nice little crunch on the edges that I left uncovered by the tomato sauce, which was purposeful, because it always gets soggy if you coat the entire thing. Both are absolutely delicious. Let's break them down based on taste and texture. So as far as taste goes, the deep fried one, it has that like classic like chicken parm you would order in a restaurant. I mean, that's kind of what I expected. But the lower cal version is actually really darn close. The pork panko crumbs don't actually throw off the flavor really hardly at all that I noticed. I bet if I actually deep fried these with pork panko, it would taste very similar. Maybe a little bit porky, but really not too much. And then other than that, I mean, we kept most everything the same. You know, the sauces are very similar. This one's just butter. We kept the cheeses the same. We kept the breadings basically the same. But the big difference in these two is the texture. It's wildly different. We got both of them a little crunchy, right? Like the exterior on this one, there are some crunchy bits, but throughout the deep fried one, it's so much more crispy, and it's just a much more pleasing crispiness texture than this one. This one is a little bit crispy. I don't know if you guys could pick it up when I was biting it, but it's kind of like chewy crispy. It's not exactly that nice crisp coating like this one has. And then as far as the actual chicken goes, 1000% the deep fried one is better. And it's because this was in the oven for so long. I think in total this ended up being in the oven for like 25 to 30 minutes because we had to develop that crust, and since it happens so slowly in the oven, that chicken's gonna get way overcooked, and it is. It's tough, it's dry, but this one, it was only in the oil for about 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and it's tender. It's still a little bit juicy and absolutely delicious. So really, it's all about that texture. The deep fried one is much better, and this is kind of similar lines to if you guys saw the oven fry video I did. It's a similar concept, right? Because they're spending so much time in the oven to get that crispiness like the fries, they kind of get dried and cooked out, and they don't taste as good and like fluffy in the fries or as juicy as the deep fried chicken. And that's really all that it comes down to. But to wrap this video up, I just have to say a huge thank you again to all of you for 100,000 subscribers. The support has been absolutely ridiculous, from YouTube to my Patreon supporters, comments on Instagram and all that. So I truly do appreciate it. I basically just want to keep bringing the best home cooking content to YouTube. That is the goal. I want people to fall in love with cooking as much as I am, and learning these techniques, I feel like, is what makes cooking most fun to me. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Keep sticking around, keep watching. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.